Smith.
Mr Acting Deputy President. Well, I'm delighted this afternoon to make my contribution to what I think is an important motion from Senator Georgiou, One Nation Senator from my home state of Western Australia. But I'm going to be a little bit more gracious. I think what Senator Georgiou is trying to do is to highlight the important plight of young Australians that are looking for jobs. Young Australians that are looking for work. And I don't think, actually, it's a bad idea that Senator Georgiou, who is a new senator here in the Senate from Western Australia, has spent some time thinking about what could be the various causes of that problem, inviting us in this place to sit down and discuss whether or not we think this particular cause has merit or whether or not other causes have merit. And what I'd like to do in the brief opportunity available to me this afternoon is to talk about why I don't think it is right to look at international students, but how I do think that there are other opportunities to provide jobs growth, particularly in our home state of Western Australia. And of course, Senator Georgiou won't be surprised to learn that for me, I'm putting my effort and my consideration on reform to the GST system, and why I think that will be a great opportunity, not just in Western Australia, and I think I might have heard Senator Polly scoff. I think I might have heard Senator Polly scoff at my idea of goods and service tax distribution reform in our country, but I'm pleased to say, Senator Polly, that none other than the Productivity Commission itself, its draft report of the Productivity Commission into horizontal fiscal equalisation says that there is opportunity for reform in our country of the GST system. Pleased that the New South Wales Treasurer has even endorsed reform. Pleased that, of course, the new Labor government, but the previous Liberal government in Western Australia has also endorsed reform. Delighted that my parliamentary colleague, the Treasurer, Mr Morrison, embraced an idea led by myself, endorsed by other West Australian Liberals, that said that the GST system needs review. But I'll come back to that in a moment, Mr Acting Deputy President, and why I think that Senator Georgiou's sentiment is correct, even if I don't necessarily agree with the first proposition that he's put forward this afternoon. But that doesn't mean we should dismiss it, because we know that things change, our economic conditions change. Indeed, the contribution that international students make to our country will continue to change over time. But I'm one that believes that the existence, the participation of international students in our education system, in the broader Australian economy, is one that benefits both our community, but our cultural development as a nation, and of course enhances our economic development. The economic benefits of international students in Australia are, for my part, undeniable. Education is our third largest import. It's contributed over $28 billion to the Australian economy in such a short time, in the period 2016 to 2017. Estimates by Deloitte's Access Economics are that international education creates over 130,000 jobs across a range of sectors. And as Senator Lyons alluded to, it's certainly my ambition to hope that the West Australian government, I hoped it would have been an ambition of the previous government, but it wasn't to be so. But my ambition is that the new West Australian government will commit its time, its energy on doing more to attract international students to Western Australia. We know that once students are here in Australia, they are expected to focus primarily on their educational studies, which is why international students can only work 40 hours in every fortnight. A national student survey found that only 36% of international higher education students reported working while studying, while 87% of vocational education and training, or VET students, did. This equated to around 200,000 students, 90,000 higher education students and 110,000 VET students in 2016. We know also that less than 40% of international students seek any kind of work in Australia, and some of those are engaged in volunteering activities rather than actually in paid work. When they compete against Australians in the job market, research shows that, or research specifically from the Australian Council for Educational Research, demonstrates that it is usually the Australians who win, not international students. And importantly, most international student employment is jobs employers find hard to fill, meaning that international students might have an interest, might have a capacity, might have a need to fill those jobs that Australian students, young Australians, might not be interested in filling in the first instance. But I think it is worth just examining the evidence just in a little bit more detail. But before I do move on to what I think might be a better way to address the issue of employment and educational opportunities for young people. We also know that the ABS has recently reported that international education income has reached $28 billion in 2016-2017, like I said, significantly up 16% from the year before. And of course, as one of our largest service exports, Australian international education is leading the transition of our economy, of the Australian economy, from one that's centred on mining to a broader knowledge and services-based economy. Now, this is very, very important. It leads me to my substantive point about the importance of GST distribution reform. I think the argument has been well made in this Senate by West Australian Senate colleagues of mine. We don't hear Labor Senate colleagues from Western Australia talking too much about GST distribution reform. But in arguing for an independent, economically focused review of Australia's horizontal fiscal equalisation arrangements, which the Treasurer commissioned and which is the subject of the draft report that was released only in the last few weeks, what West Australian Liberals have been arguing for is that GST distribution reform, while important to Western Australia, is not just limited to benefiting Western Australia. That in fact, if we're going to have the macroeconomic reform that is needed in this country to propel it to the next stage of growth, the next stage of productivity, then it is important that every element of the economy come under close examination, forensic examination, in fact. Now, I would argue that the GST system has gone unchallenged for too long. And what's been very, very valuable about the draft Productivity Commission report is it has at least opened up the issue of horizontal fiscal equalisation, opened up the issue of GST distribution reform to make sure that that system is doing everything that it possibly can to support growth, to support productivity in our country. A couple of months ago, with the support of the Parliamentary Library, and I'm very, very grateful for the work that they were able to do on my behalf, it was discovered, it was revealed that in the period 2000-2001 to 2015-2016, WA had contributed $186 billion to the rest of Australia. $186 billion to the rest of Australia. Now, that is a big figure. And I'll be the first one to say that when you go out into the community and talk about $186 billion, people don't know what it means. How do you digest what $186 billion means to your local economy? So with the help of the Parliamentary Library, I'm grateful that they were able to turn that into an infrastructure loss figure, but also an employment loss figure. So as a result of that, we know that Western Australia lost $73.1 billion in possible infrastructure spending as a result of a flawed GST distribution system. And more particularly, to Senator Giorgio's motion this afternoon, Western Australia lost, on average, 94,000 jobs over that period. Lost 94,000 jobs over that period. So this afternoon I agree with the sentiment of Senator Giorgio, that is, we should be doing more to make jobs available to young Australians, but I would argue that Senator Giorgio should join with myself and other West Australian Liberal senators in arguing for GST distribution reform, because it will deliver important infrastructure spending, it will deliver important jobs growth. And you're right, Senator Hanson, I saw you nodding your head. To your credit, Senator Giorgio is on the bandwagon, is on the campaign supporting GST distribution reform in Western Australia. It was great to wake up. It was great to wake up to headlines like this. Great to wake up to headlines like this in Western Australia because we know that reform of anything in our country takes time, takes energy, but the most important thing is it's a demonstration that unfortunately the squeaky wheel gets the oil. I'm pleased that West Australian Liberal senators and members have been squeaking those wheels, and we are on the path to progress on GST distribution.
Senator Chisholm.